Alright, I'm going to try to do an in-depth breakdown of the standard helium neon, and then we're going to move on from there to things such as various windows, Brewster windows, and tunable. And by various windows I meant mirrors, actually. Misspoke. So we're going to start off under the assumption that we are using a standard 632.8 nanometer 2-mirror tube. No windows, nothing fancy. Just going to keep it basic. So how this works is you've got four major components here that are going to be at play here. Your outer tube, which, as some of you may see, here's your outer tube. I was never known for being an artist, so bear with me here. And this outer tube is going to be what holds your helium neon. That's all it does. Consider it just a fuel tank. Within that, you're going to have what's known as the bore. Now this is a very thick glass wall with a tube within it, a very thin tube within it, 1 to 3 millimeters in diameter. Now that's where everything is really going to take place. Now, we'll get to that in just a second. On each end, you're going to have your anode and cathode with a mirror. We'll just, for the sake of this demonstration, anode on this end, cathode on this end, positive, negative. Now, what do we do with a helium neon is we apply a great deal of electricity to both ends. And what that does is it sends a great deal of electricity through the tube, creating a circuit, ionizing the gas. And ionization is a process in which you send a lot of electricity through a gas, thus ripping the electrons off of it, exciting them, and then you put them in a plasma state. This also causes them to change their orbit, going up and then falling back down, releasing a photon. What we want to do is send them, into an excited state, and then have them fall into a less excited state, but they're still not grounded, and thus releasing a photon at a stable level. If you look at the helium neon in operation where you can see the plasma tube, you can see dozens of lines. And if you actually look at it documented, you'll see hundreds of lines. However, these are all unstable. They will not actually settle at this point. The 5 common ones, the 543, 594, 604, 612, and 632.8 are the stable ones. And there's a couple others in there, but really not worth getting into. Plus, I want to keep this basic, so we're just going to stick to 632.8. So when that photon gets excited, or when that electron gets excited and falls back down and releases a photon, it's going to go somewhere within this tube, within this bore. And the goal is to have it hit one mirror, bounce to the other mirror, and continue until it eventually gets out. So, the way we do that is we coat the mirrors. On one end, you're going to have what's known as the HR, or high reflector. These normally reflect at a minimum of 99.9%. I've seen up to 4 significant figures there. On the other end, you're going to have what's known as your OC, or output coupler. And those are normally about 98.5 to 99% with this wavelength. Again, it changes depending on what you're working with, but for the sake of demonstration, we're just going to go with that number. Now, you may ask, well, why do that? Why not let all the light through? Well, the problem with that is that in that moment of ionization, in that moment where a photon is released, there is such a minuscule amount of light that if we didn't put any mirrors here, you wouldn't see anything at all. You need to try to trap it in there and allow it to gain. Thus, enough gets through. Now, what I mean by that is you're going to have these windows, or these mirrors here. They reflect so much back in that within the laser you can have hundreds to thousands of milliwatts. However, you can get that little bit out. So, and if you make this too small, you're not going to see anything as well. And if you make it too high, you're going to limit it too much, and again, you won't see any visible output. So there's kind of a sweet spot in there, and all manufacturers kind of have their own setup, but it's not worth getting into. So we've gone over the mirror process, or the window, or yes, mirror process. So what if you were to, say, take this mirror away, and you wanted something else there? Well, that is what we'll get into now. And on this end, we took away the HR, and this end we have the OC still, again, up a coupler. And we have the bore, and on this end, get a close, I'll do a bigger version of it here. You're going to have what's known as a Brewster window. And that is basically where they took the bore, they didn't add a mirror to it, they took the bore and they just sliced it. And then they put a window in front of it. Now what this does is it allows all of the internal gain to exit. So, I mean, if you were to put a mirror here, you would, in it, and you aligned it, you would see everything that's in here, all this internal gain, would also be in this small spot here between the window and the mirror, the external mirror. Now what this does is it opens up an entire new set of arrangements that you can now play with. Say for instance, I mean, we're going to keep it to the 632.8. Say for instance you put another 632.8 window there. Then you would have a 632.8 operating laser. However, if you replace this window with something known as a broadband OC, then it allows you to do much more. And by broadband, I mean it's a broad bandwidth. And when you think of bandwidth, think of your internet. If you have a small bandwidth, only a little bit can get through. Only a small amount of information go at a time. With an OC only reflecting 632.8 nanometers, you have very small bandwidth that only that wavelength can travel through. However, if you get a larger bandwidth, more information can go through, and if you get a larger bandwidth OC, more lines can go through it. Thus, more opportunities. So if you were to take this OC, and for the sake of demonstration, you said it could go 600 to 650 nanometers. That's what it reflected at, let's just go with 99%. I mean, it's going to be a little bit more when you go further to 600 and a little less when you go to 650, but for demonstration, 99%. And over here you have an HR, again, high reflector, that has that same 600 to 650 at 99%. Now, and you aligned it and everything was smooth, and you put a grating in front of it, or a prism, and what you would see it would be a lot different than your average helium neon. You'd see probably 2 to, up to 5 different spots, all with different wavelengths. However, and that's what's known as a multi-line. That's what causes the different multi-line lasers that you've seen me post about. However, if you took that mirror and got rid of it, and you were put something else in there, and just for demonstration, I'm just going to do this part of the tube only. So you have, right here, you have your Brewster window, and you put a prism right in front of it. But it's not just a regular prism. This one has a mirror within it. Now, the purpose of this is simple. Your prism, as some of you may have seen, or if you haven't, think of Pink Floyd or your chemistry classes. Some of you may be further back than others. But just think back to when they shined, a flashlight or a fluorescent light or whatever, any form of white light through the prism, and you saw your rainbow. That's precisely what this is going to do. However, with this mirror in there, what's special about it is this mirror, that's where your HR is. That's what's going to reflect your 600 to 650 nanometers at 99%. This right here. Well, why do that? Well, your light's going to come, your internal gain, your hundreds of milliwatts, tens of watts, whatever, is going to come into the prism, get diffracted, and then hit the mirror. Thus, you've created, here's your mirror, or here's your prism. You're going to have all these lines coming back like that, back into the tube. Well, this is how a tunable laser works. If you were to take that prism and you were to turn it in one of these directions, it would change the spectrum. Because if you were to turn a prism with, regularly, the spectrum that it projects turns with it. So turning this allows a single line, say for instance 604 nanometers, to go through the cavity, hit the other mirror, your OC, travel back and forth, build, and then exit. Thus you can select a single line at a time. Now in between each line you're going to have a dark spot, and that's just because there's nothing there to laze. However, if you keep turning it, you're going to turn to various wavelengths, and that is how your tunable laser works. So, that is a quick breakdown of the helium neon laser.